Hello and welcome to the New Indian Express Online. I'm Bancy Kalpa. With me are two very well-known guests and political analysts. I have to my right Mr. Prakash Belwadi, who's a very well-known actor in addition to being a journalist. Also to my left here, we have a HR professional, someone who's also a political analyst, Mr. B.S. Murthy. So welcome on the show. First of all, we're going to be talking about a lack of a succession plan when we look at certain communities, like the Idiga community, they used to have a chief minister from that community by the name of S. Bangarappa. They used to have at least 4 to 5 members of parliament. A union minister, almost a permanent union minister, Mr. Janardhan Pujari. But now the community is in decline. The leadership is completely eroded. There is talk that the same thing that happened to the Idiga community could happen to the Kurba community, where we have the present chief minister who's a Kurba, but he is well over 76. We also have K.S. Ishwarappa, someone in the Bharatiya Janata Party, he is also past 75. Also, Mr. Adugur Vishwanath, someone who's in the BJP, someone who served as minister in the Congress earlier, he's also past 75. H.M. Revana past 75. Also, when we look at the Muslim community, we have seen very great stalwarts in the past. We have seen leaders like Jafar Sharif, we have seen leaders like C.M. Ibrahim, who was union minister, leaders like Roshan Beg, Aziz Seth, Abdul Nazir Saab. But now the community, the representation of the community has come down, the leadership, the caliber of leadership has come down. So, first, let me ask you, Mr. Belwadi, leaders are not born overnight. A leader needs to be groomed. Uh, and most parties have no succession plan, nothing to groom a leader. So they expect a leader to take over and perform the next, and that usually doesn't happen. So, what is your take on this leaders waning leadership?
I thought a little about this after I got the phone call from you to do this interview. And I will just say my opening thoughts, and I'll only elaborate along these lines. The first is what occurred to me at the outset is that there is no great urban center in Karnataka. I'm limiting my comments to Karnataka, outside of Bangalore. So whenever there's a mass leader from any community, see, I would say that, say Mr. Siddaramaiah, for instance, he came into the circle of Ramakrishna Hegde in around 1984 or so, and he was appointed as chairman of the Kannada Watchdog Committee, and from then on he has been more or less a Bangalore person. See, S.R. Bommai, was then the topmost, among the topmost, at least, Lingayat leaders. We became a Bangalore person. And H.D. Devegowda has camped in Bangalore practically
For most of his
political life. So what I'm saying is, I don't want to keep elaborating, but so Jafar Sharif lived here. So what I'm saying is that their children and grandchildren, these elders, they're heavily urbanized. And I think like most urbanized youngsters, I don't think they place some great value on identifying themselves by their caste affiliations.
identity.
They see the caste identity as nominal, and maybe it's useful during elections. In a constituency, they may be contesting elections, but they do not entirely identify with the community in their social life or in their upbringing. Their sense of self is different. The caste identity is actually marginal to their existence. This is one point, which is why I feel in the future I think it will be more and more difficult to find leaders on a caste basis. The second thing is the decline in leadership is an overall problem. It's not just caste based, it's even geography based. If you look, there are great leaders from North Karnataka, great leaders from coastal Karnataka, great leaders from South Karnataka, kind of thing. Even that kind of thing is declining. You don't see any outstanding figure, because the age of mass leaders at least in Karnataka, seems to be waning, because I don't think anybody has an issue that can actually gather everybody in some frenzy. And I think this caste-based reservation idea is seriously, in Karnataka at least. The Wadiyars, introduced reservation in Karnataka. Karnataka, I think, was the first
One of the
state.
earliest.
The earliest Mysore province was the first to. So I think caste is in Karnataka. If you come with, this idea of caste reservation, increasing it beyond 50%, a lot, it's kind of really slightly dead idea it is. And the third thing I want to tell you is more delicate, and I'll stop with that one. See, why is caste important? See, the caste is a problem if there is discrimination. If there is no discrimination, how is caste a problem? Nobody cares, If the dignity of any caste is the same, is one caste is the same as the other, what is the problem with caste? It's a problem because there is, caste has discrimination. With reservation, it's positive discrimination. Otherwise, the other social negative idea of discrimination we know. But in the positive discrimination, in the caste-based reservation idea, what has happened is government-generated jobs are shrinking rapidly. They're government-owned public sector industries, government departments, government itself. It's with the technology, in the future with AI, I'm telling you, jobs in the government sector will shrink dramatically. So, you can create a larger percentage of reservation, but where are the jobs? Okay, it's a hoax of the public. Now, our just deceased former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh proposed caste-based reservation in the private sector. It was, I think, even at that time, it was an idea where it was, to me, it seemed like more mischief than sense. Even if today somebody brings up the idea of caste-based reservation in the private sector, I can see the nightmare it is in terms of implementation, social acceptance. It's a kind of idea that can divide the country itself. Because some states may totally throw it, or it may create problems and within country migration of which is forced on people. So, given these things, I think caste as an important identifier for as a political idea. I think it has had its day and it's going to see its sunset soon. This is my opinion.
Mr. Murthy, we have spoken on this issue before. When we look at certain communities, like for example, certain communities which had a larger, representation in the assembly and in the council. For example, the Lingayat community. In the 70s, between 72 and 78, there used to be a whopping 92 Lingayat legislators. I'm talking of only the assembly. I'm not talking of the council. Now that number has come down to just 56. This is one side of it. So, of course, many will say, yes, we have delimitation in 24 solid Lingayat constituencies. So this is one serious issue. But overall, when you look at, I'm looking at no succession plan. Let's say on this issue, the same question I asked Mr. Belwadi, the succession issue is lacking. There is a constant complaint that leaders do not groom, the next in line succession.
Exactly.
For example, Mr. Sidramaya, whom has he groomed? Mr. Adugur Vishwanath, whom has he groomed? I'm looking at just one community, let's say Kurba community, because they are ruling just now. Who have they groomed? So, the one is this lack of succession plan. There is no grooming, it's all selfish. A leader takes all kind of a thing. So what is your take on this? So many communities, when you don't have a leader, that community goes unrepresented. I'm talking from that point of view.
Exactly. My point of view is what creates leaders.
Yeah.
The current leaders or mass leaders that we currently see, who were they? How did they actually become leaders? It was primarily due to political movements. political fights, whether it is the farmers, whether it would be any other Buddha movements, land reforms. Land reforms created the largest chunk of leaders in Karnataka. That includes
Includes
Bangarappa to
B.S. Yediyurappa.
B.S. Yediyurappa also. The last 20 years, where has been any greater movements where there is an opportunity for somebody to emerge and fight out? Mostly the governance issue is where most of the political leadership is now focused on. Bijli Sadak Pani kind of scenarios. Whereas you go into the 50s and 60s and 70s, it was fundamental your own identity and your own livelihood at the core. And small rights is what people needed, which was not there. Those opportunities were grabbed by leaders, and typically the movement started. Farmers movement with MD Danjan Swami, Kagorti Papa, Kannada movement again, which created a whole bunch of leaders. That way. So today it is unimaginable for a smaller, microscopic, whether it is a backward caste or anybody to actually come to the mainstream until unless he hogs on to the national narratives, right, which puts him there. Otherwise, who are the mass leaders of Karnataka? If you are a caste leader, you become a mass leader. You become a caste leader first, you mobilize your caste, so that ensures a minimum guarantee for our rest of the candidates in an election. So bandwagon people join. So a caste leader is a mass leader in the Indian political context. You take up whichever state you go. I think this is universality in India is that you first become a caste leader, then you become a mass leader. This is a wrong thing, but still this is the route to power. But what we currently see in all across, like how Prakash also pointed out, most of the scenarios in terms of discrimination is not much. It's more a power grab. Any caste issue is fundamentally a route to a power grab. And in that also, you have a huge chunk of, politics is about representation. Today, imagine a Muslim becoming a chief minister of a state, or a small microscopic like Savita Samaj of Veerappa Moili becoming a chief minister of a state, or a Rajput Samaj. Rajput Samaj had two chief ministers in Karnataka, in Dharm Singh and Devraj Aras. Unimaginable today in any context. So the power grab is so huge, backed up with resources today. It is more or less a closed door for smaller communities, for the grabbing power. It's basically a power share, and unfortunately, if there is no power, there is nothing much you can deliver to your community also today. So,
I didn't know that Devraj would be classified as Rajput.
Kshatriya.
I was speaking to a certain advocate who represents a very tiny, minuscule community, and he was telling me that he comes from such a tiny community, and their community doesn't even have one MLA in all these years of independence. And there are so many such communities. Communities who are so small, so minuscule. I mean, they could be in any one. They could either be in the OBC spectrum, or they could be in the Dalit spectrum, they could be in the general spectrum. But there are so many tiny communities in all these years of independence. They have not managed to have one single representative either in the assembly or in the council. So, of course, this entire issue of caste comes in, because there are some communities who say, by turn, give us a representation. Otherwise, we'll go without representation. So, the whole issue starts from there. While we have the Dalit representation, we have reserved seats. We have the scheduled tribe representation because they have the reserved seats. But and also very funnily, no Dalit gets elected from general seats. They get elected only from the reserved seats. It's so ironical that they get elected, which means in other seats the Dalits. What about them? They're almost 18 plus 5%. So almost 23-24%, almost uniformly across the state.
Largest social group in Karnataka
Are Dalits. But they don't receive a single seat. Even now, even in this present assembly, neither in the previous assembly, not even one Dalit gets represented in a general seat. It's so...
no party gives
them the ticket.
See, that is because, that there are reserved constituencies, that rotate over time. Then, no party feels probably obliged to do it. But you see, even this idea of actually giving positions to caste, in either in the cabinet or, seats, to contest elections. it is all part of a larger idea of India, which where the government was the provider. There were a large number of poor people. The government was nearly the sole provider of everything possible. One channel to watch, one newspaper in a city, to be endorsed by the government. So one, you have to get food from a ration shop, like you have to buy liquor only through government now. Like the government became the sole provider with everything. So government was in a dominant position of actually like saying favoring some castes, and you can. But you see, this is not that India. This provider government is a provider. India has been challenged in a very big way with the new economy. Ever since 1991, we have a new India, and you can take one side, or you can if the finance minister of the country has challenged by her husband on the economy, all of us can have different views on it. So it makes I'm not going to talk about the merits of it, but the government as a provider is nothing. See, government's biggest the present government's biggest providing thing in this term is to give freebies. And what else is it providing? Is it providing greater infrastructure? I'm not blaming this government, neither the previous government. It's just that the government as a provider has become, the government is quite poor at the moment in India. It was then also it was poor.
It was a monopoly provider.
But it was a monopoly provider practically. But now many people can do it. It's getting open to many people. So I feel the issue is, supposing the three of us, we form three different major caste groups in Karnataka and we contest elections. Okay? And then all three of us have some, 20%, 23% and, 19% kind of seats, we have got. Who should become the PM?
Absolutely.
They'll get a neutral person to become. That's what happened in when the Karnataka Kranti Ranga
83.
they came. You saw how it's the story of two
Cats fighting and the monkey gets the.
So that's what happened, right? So I'm saying, if you want to be a big leader, to identify yourself with caste is a very dangerous thing. Just look at this around the country. Who is there because of caste at the top? You tell me. See, you need to be like caste free to get to the top increasingly. See, the Congress always had the advantage. Nobody identifies the Congress party's top family with any caste.
With any caste.
That was their major advantage, and others have learned that game now. Somebody who positions himself or herself as a national leader does not say what caste I come from. They will not do it.
It's basically the route to the top, not the top itself.
Yes.
Per se. So most of the political
It's
leadership,
an entry to the system.
it's an entry and halfway path to the power. But as you go across, I think people widen the scope of the thoughts
Horizons.
in that sense. And of course, when I say OBC or a backward caste, it is not one. Basically, it covers 100. So the smaller social groups typically look up to the largest social group's leader to be their leader.
Absolutely.
That's the current scenario that we have in Karnataka as of now. This is a time-tested formula which has worked, so it still continues to work. With time, everything changes. I think ground is shifting to a large extent. This big idea of the caste has been challenged by BJP nationally across with a different narrative.
It's totally
It has also given them success in certain contexts, and on the other side, it also kills stronger leaders.
Absolutely.
For example, if you look at it, big leaders have an ability to bring big change. Ability, I'm not saying they bring. They build a narrative, they build a strength to such an extent that they can bring big changes that way. Are all the big leaders doing it? Not sure. But then, do they have the ability? Yes. But an unknown leader at the top, can he bring any change? Zero.
Absolutely.
Practically zero. Sharad Pawar leading Maharashtra can bring in huge opportunities for Maharashtra. An S.M. Krishna here, or a Siddaramaiah here, or a Jayalalitha or a Stalin there, has an inherent advantage for the state when you are a big mass leader. And that scenario, if you look at it, on the other side, BJP has been killing across in that. You bring in a mid-level or an unknown leader and put it. As I say, BJP is now the Congress of the 80s. I can bring in anybody, I can send off anybody. That way. Except your Maharashtra and Uttar Pradesh, everywhere else BJP rules. Basically, you have unknown party functionaries who who are the head of the states or who are the chief ministers.
Okay, I want to ask you this question. The OBC movement, the entire,
Wonder movement.
yeah, backward movement. This movement really started because the backwards always said we don't get our share perennially. Election after election, we don't get our share. So the backwards, it's a huge number of communities. They come together and they say we form the backwards. But do you think that with this lack of a succession, with this petty selfishness of leaders, do you think the caste movement? Because if you look at the backward movement in Karnataka, the big daddy of it is Mr. Devarajas. The second person who comes from this movement is Mr. S. Bangarappa, both of whom are no more. The present movement after Bangarappa to Siddaramaiah took a huge amount of time, but yes, now we have a backward leader in Siddaramaiah. So, do you think this backward movement itself per se could take a hit when the leaders are gone? Because when you don't have a leader, who is there to represent you? There's nobody. So,
To a large extent, the mass leaders are okay without a succession planning rather than have a succession planning following up with another backward leader. So this is a political thought process. It took practically 20 years for another backward leader to emerge in Karnataka, whereas the other, whether it's the Lingayat or Okligas, they have natural leadership as such which are always there, ready to be anointed. That is not the case when it comes to that. So your ability to garner 20, 30 smaller microscopic communities. When I say microscopic, 1 million is microscopic in Kannada.
in Kannada.
500,000 is your last out. You're a nobody. If you're a 500,000 populated social group, nobody bothers, nobody cares. You can't even have an.
Also, your geographical spread. If you're concentrated in one area, you can get more 4, 6 or 5 years.
So,
absolutely.
Spread over
I think that today's succession plan per se, mostly either it is family driven. That way, in a party like JDS, it's end of the day by default it has to be family driven. Janata Parivar had great leaders, built great leaders simply because most of them were on the streets fighting for people.
Absolutely.
Most of the time. So when you starting with your Bangarappa to H.D. Devegowda to J.H. Patel to Abdul Nazir Saab, J.M.P. Prakash, some of the finest people Karnataka saw actually came from Janata Parivar.
Yeah.
And most of them today happens to be on the
They're all in the
Congress
Congress.
spectrum.
See, I want to tell you, if you look at the present mass leaders, if you look at Siddaramaiah ji, see, had he identified himself only as a Kuruba leader, I don't think he would have had this all Karnataka. His idea was to do Ainda thing.
Ainda.
Actually, whether it worked for him fully or not, it was a Ainda thing with Congress that made the big difference for him. That he could, go transcend the glass
caste boundaries.
the glass ceiling that Devegowda had imposed on him.
Yeah,
Let me put it. I'm sorry if I'm putting it like that. Okay, but he could do because of the Congress. If you look at Yediyurappa, there was a belief that he was more than a Lingayat leader. There was something about him,
Charisma.
More acceptable.
Horatagara type of person. He transcended his just his Lingayat boundaries.
He's a farmer leader to start.
And had a form.
He was a farmer leader to
So
start.
he could do. And if you see even the Devegowda ji himself, I'm using the word Devegowda ji because he's a national leader. Okay, so I think he's India's topmost leader in my opinion. He realized, I think, too late in the day for him that he should not identify himself as a Vakaliga leader alone. And he did something that he had the sympathy of the Muslim community. And that can work or cannot work. In the last elections in Karnataka, I'm not saying we can read anything from it, but we saw that the old system does not hold. That much we can tell. The BJP was led down by Lingayats to some extent. Devegowda was led down by Vokkaligas to a larger extent. So basically, what is the future of this caste-based politics? The other thing I will tell you is that the Muslims, or say Gollas or Kurubas, because they're not going to be represented, they will need to attach themselves to. So it's a symbiotic thing. They also need to attach themselves, like you said, to a larger leadership, and that person promises some things for them. But I think it's getting more and more complex till it becomes unwieldy, and you'll have to do elections on issues other than caste. Such a day will come. I don't know how quickly it'll come, but the old thing is beginning to like unravel a bit now, So
Everything changes with time.
Everything changes with time. Also, when we look at, let's look at this also. Bengaluru has not had elections in the longest of times. When the BJP was in power, they were very concerned that they might not get the sufficient number of representation. That's the allegation people make. So they withheld elections. They just delayed. When the Congress is now in power, they said they will hold elections, but it's already quite some time, and they're still dilly-dallying on that. And the big fear is that if we don't get represented adequately in the council, then we stand to lose face, and it's a 5 year amount of pain. Plus, also we have the ZPTP. So your quick take on it, because while caste is not so important in urban India, but in the ZPTP it would be more of caste.
no, because it is supposed to be in theory a casteless election, right? When the panchayat system supposedly,
Gram Panchayat is without
Party
symbols.
list.
Without
party
symbols.
less. So in that way, I'm saying there is caste-based reservations
Yeah.
and work there, but it is not a caste party-driven caste. It's not supposed to be. But the problem is, it has not been the panchayat thing. Raja idea has actually been. Karnataka was a pioneer, and we have fallen back. 73rd Amendment out, it's not as functioning as it should. 74th Amendment has not even begun to function in urban. The reason why people do not care that much, even though we haven't had elections in the last 9 years for municipal elections, is because the corporation is rendered powerless. It has nothing. Mumbai, the municipality earns 50 to 60,000 crores. That's their budget in a year. In Karnataka, you can put a budget of 8,000 crores and earn only some 3,000, 4,000 crores. It's pathetic. It is the Bangalore cities. So people don't care. They've lost faith in the governance system, because the chief minister of Karnataka, whoever he is or she is going to be in the future, I don't know, will never allow power to be transferred to a mayor here. A directly elected mayor or a mayor in council, and this will hold true to a lesser extent in the Zilla Panchayat system. Is because the MLAs are already pretty powerless. Their great power is if there is majority minority, some way of actually like bringing down the government, and MLA becomes powerful. Otherwise, the MLAs practically become useless, and they are very resentful of the panchayat system. Sometimes I feel that. And the big leaders here will never let go of Bangalore. They'll want control on it. So you cannot change it until the collapse of the old system happens. And then if you're active and you can enforce, the implementation of the 74th Amendment, at least for Bangalore City, you have a, metropolitan planning committee here. Then things may change with a directly elected mayor who has a 3-year term or a 5-year term, or a mayor in council. And you do this across. Without decentralization, Karnataka is on the way down. Okay, we were a great state. It's on a decline, and it'll keep going down unless we decentralize. You can't sit in Bangalore because the leaders today are fairly incompetent. They're not like very capable like in the past. Why they're trammeled, whether they're trammeled because they don't have acumen or they don't have interest, and say I will run Karnataka. It's not going to happen. And we will have to look at many years of decline till this rot is stemmed.
Unless Bangalore becomes a city state, like Delhi.
No, we must. I've been proposing an idea, as in it may be idiotic. It's like a college debate thing. I think Karnataka should be divided to 8 or 10 Kannada states, and those regions can develop then because Bangalore's for politicians sitting in Bangalore and running side businesses here will never have any interest in developing other parts of Karnataka. They're selfish and, like you said, self-centered and they're on survival mode. That's it.
No, my question is, we are headed, an election is long due in the Brihat Bengaluru Mahanagara where all of us live. Number one. Number two, elections are long due in the Jilla and, the Jilla Panchayat.
Exactly.
So, where caste plays a very important role. So, how do you look at it? Because even in the urban areas, caste is important because most of the tickets are handed out on the basis of caste. Most. So, how do you look at this importance of caste here in these two upcoming elections?
Jilla Panchayat and your corporation are the nurseries of future leadership, political leadership everywhere. D.K. Shivkumar entered politics as a Jilla Panchayat person. Few of them even entered as Gram Panchayat. Sanmanya Devegowda ji started as a Gram Panchayat that way. These are the nurseries of budding leadership that way. So most of the sitting Bangalore MLAs or Bangalore ministers used to be corporators at some point of time. That way. I think it is pretty
Suresh Kumar used to be a corporator, Ramlinga Reddy used to be a corporator, Somana used to be a corporator.
So I think this is utmost importance that BBMP elections or local bodies elections, either whatever the reservation part, at least there is somebody to go and complain to, go and address themselves to. So when you move into the rural areas of Karnataka, there is definitely a caste angle given to the Jilla Panchayat. And the better part I personally feel is the unrepresented microscopic minorities get a chance to taste power, which in every other scenario they would have never got even a Jilla Panchayat seat or a Gram Panchayat seat. I think that is the beauty of the constitution which has given the capability for some people to start. Otherwise, just imagine, even if there are no reservations for those microscopic minorities, that would have been gobbled up by the caste which have
larger community.
resources. You don't necessarily need the numbers also today. To a large extent, it's a resource game today. So, just to example, in Telangana, for about 119 seats, 40 to 45 seats, both the parties give tickets to Reddys. Reddys are 6% of Telangana.
No, sir, I'll tell you, I have a point, my problem with that idea, even in urban areas, caste is important. I'll tell you what has happened with it. It's got equalized. What I mean by that is, see, in Karnataka, for instance, all three major parties have tasted power.
Yeah, absolutely.
They all have a lot of money and they spend a lot of money at elections. They'll go and give money to voters and their homes. Now, what happens is, just like they give money everywhere, all of them do caste-based representation.
Absolutely.
For when they pick candidates, they put candidates, they all play the caste game only. So the caste factor in elections has got neutralized. You continue to play the game because the other person plays the game also. There is no longer the tragedy of this is everywhere smaller communities, like he's saying, just get completely isolated and left out. So if you can get a leader from any of these major parties who looks like a leader who can transcend his caste, people will feel interested in him, I feel. Think about it.
Agreed.
That is the issue.
See, discrimination per se doesn't exist on that part. But discrimination for power exists. Discrimination as people doesn't. I fully agree. So microscopic minorities don't get power. They are not discriminated. But it's an opportunity for them to taste power. And people at the core of Indian electorate believe that, a social group believes that without power, you can't achieve anything, which is also a fact. Nobody cares otherwise. Just look at it. For example, Kodavas. There used to be amazing leaders coming in from the Kurg. That is now obliterated. There is nobody like that.
Absolutely.
So who represents today Kodavas? We don't know. Right? There is a voice from Malnad. There is a voice from somewhere. There is a voice from STs. Those are all gone. Until unless somebody had to sit across for a dharna or do a walkathon or do that, things got happened. People used to sit dharna for water. People used to sit dharna for channel or any of those things. You don't see that anymore now. It is simply because now it's all done on caste, and also I still support a system where a microscopic minority gets some power, because otherwise in the resource game of politics today they would never taste power. For that matter.
No, see, I'll say it's a wish list, but I'm saying, is there a trend in that direction? That's all I'm asking. See, if somebody, say right now they may have two voter identity cards, or they may have passion for their native places, and during an election they may go to Rane Ben, or to
Or Tadas or
Anyway.
Bradley.
and to
People go to Bihar,
Humnabad, and vote and come. But their children who will be born in Bangalore will not have that affection. They'll not do. What will happen is, if you are even among the Lingayat Veerashaivas, if you are belong to one of the 18 sects, and that is your passionate affiliation that your parents and grandparents have fed to you, and you come to Bangalore, and in 13 or 15 constituencies, Telugu people are actually contesting the election. What will you do with it? I'm saying,
You're right.
urbanization is killing
His skills.
this caste division to some extent.
To some extent.
Resource comes to the forefront here. So more resourceful person is obviously the most accepted person.
Absolutely. They say that if Mahatma Gandhi contested elections
He would
now,
lose, for sure.
none of the parties would give him a ticket first. And if he got a ticket, he would himself lose.
It's a fact of it, fact of life.
Because, with zero resources, you can't win elections. It's almost a given that when you get a ticket, there is a transaction. And the moment you get a vote, there is a transaction. So there is, right from ticket to vote, is transactional. And one party MLA said that even for the chief minister's post, there is a huge amount to be paid, and he went out to spell it. I mean, I'm not going into the details, but almost everything is viable now.
We used to talk about a circle inspector. If you wanted to be a circle inspector in the
Upparpet or Chickpet.
Upparpet area, you had to pay so much. That's what we used to say. Now every post is up for this.
Grabs, absolutely. So we come to the very end of this program. Well, the issue of caste, it is important for elections in Karnataka still, and most parties do give out tickets based on caste. Of course, resources are very important, but the big question is, without a succession plan, are many communities going to be rendered leaderless or unrepresented in the coming days simply because they have no succession plan? This is still the question before us. Thank you for joining us
Thanks,
with your thoughts.
Interesting question, though.
Thank you.